Hi, I'm Simon. Thanks for tuning into The Ordinary Filmmaker. If you're new here, subscribe to get notification of new videos like this one so you don't miss any news, rumors, camera gear reviews, or tutorials. And by the way, I'm giving away a brand new Canon EOS R5 full-frame mirrorless camera to one lucky viewer. Details are in the description down below, or you can watch this video here, but essentially all you have to do is subscribe for your chance to win. Now there are some age blackouts and location blackouts due to legal reasons, but again, watch that video and you can see the legalese in the description down below. Well, it's been a slow news week. The big news was about a firmware update across Canon's line of stills hybrid cameras, but it was a bit of a sleeper. We were expecting a big update on the Canon R5, but it was mostly a bug fix. And I took them to task and many of you were upset, but let's be fair here. Canon's been providing us with firmware updates every month since the release at the end of July. That's 3 updates. And I expect another update for the R5 and the R6 before Christmas. But that being said, I got a fair amount of comments about my focus on video, that these are photography cameras. But that's not what the market wants. The tide has turned. The market isn't happy with just good stills capabilities. The market also wants video capabilities as well. The day of stills only cameras, they're not gone, but the sun is definitely setting. Now, the current R5 sales aren't being driven by corporate accounts, but by hobbyists. And I was speaking to my Canon rep a few weeks back, and he said that in Canada at least, the bulk of the R5 sales, they're not going to corporate accounts, they're going to hobbyists. And again, my rep, he works for corporate sales in Canon. Oh, and one more thing before I get to your questions. Now, I am happy to answer your questions weekly or in the comment section of each video. It's safe to say that I answer and comment more than most of my peers, but every now and then I come across a comment loaded with questions or that takes an awful lot of thought to answer, and I don't often have the time to give each question and comment the time it needs. To better serve you, I offer consultation for $50, and each session is up to an hour. If you're interested, the link's in the comment section down below. But I want to share 2 recent sessions that I had. One is with Moving Matt. He recently started his channel on travel, but has been concerned about how to develop content when traveling is difficult these days. He also wanted to know how to grow his channel faster. So to make up for the lack of travel, he started covering camera gear. Looks like I'm going to start to, it looks like I'm starting to have competition there. And Scott Levy, he's an editor with decades of experience with a major US network. Scott just started out and posted his first video. Scott reached out to me after seeing how I reached 16K subs in just a year. I advised him on how to grow his channel quickly using sound business architecture principles. And if you take a look at what he's done already, which there isn't a whole lot, he's already got a great logo, he's got great editing skills, and I really think that Scott is going to reach for the stars pretty soon. So do me a favor, let's show Scott how effective networking is by getting him to 100 subs by this Sunday. And let's give Matt a boost towards 1,000. All right, now for your questions. The first question is from Mohammed. Mohammed asks, what are your views on the new Canon C70? I think it's a great camera. If you're starting a channel or doing event work, you want to seriously look at the C70 as an option versus the R5, and I'm going to tell you why. It's video-centric. It's got those ND filters built in. It's everything about it screams video. And it is a terrific camera. Now, it's based on the Super 35. It's not a full-frame sensor. And what you got to understand here is that full-frame isn't necessarily better. In the filmmaking world, it's all about Super 35. All the lenses are designed for Super 35. Full-frame is new. So don't think that because it isn't full-frame, it isn't a great camera. You can record endlessly. But the only drawback to the C70 though, because again, the video spec modes are really good, the frame rates are really good, it has 2 SD cards. And if you're recording an event that's an hour or 2 hours long, I don't care if they're V90 cards, it's going to take a while to get that content off. So if you're going to get the C70, you really want to make sure you're buying it with a Ninja 5 along with it. Because what that's going to allow you to do is choose your codec. So if you're an Avid fan, you can go with the Avid codecs. And if you're not, then go with Apple ProRes 422 or RAW. And you can edit right off the SSD and you're going to significantly save down the amount of editing time. So the question you really need to ask yourself is, and again, this is based on budget too, because if you can afford it, go with the R5 and a C70 or go with the R6 and the C70. Focus on the C70 for your video work, and then use the R5 or R6 for occasional video that you might need, and as your for filling up your photo capabilities. And of course, if you don't really need photo, I would be going for the C70, Mohammed. I think that is a very good camera. And the only kind of issues I had with it are taken care of with the Ninja 5. Dan asks, when shooting photos with the Canon R5, does the exposure meter stay visible the whole time? I use a DSLR, the Canon SL2, and the meter only shows up when I adjust my exposure settings and then disappears. Well, you know what, Dan? I don't shoot an awful lot of photos, and when I do, most of the time, I'm shooting with the LCD and I have everything turned off. But when I'm doing portraits, I got my 50mm on there, I'm always using the viewfinder, and you can see it right down along the bottom. Stop the FOMO asks, now that the Sony FX6 has launched, please compare it against the Canon C70 with the speed booster in terms of the best use case for each. Your existing lens collection aside, if you weren't starting from scratch, which cinema camera would you choose? Wow, I think you're trying to trap me here, FOMO. This is really tough because all the decisions I make, and I've said this many times, as you know, it depends on the gear that you have. The gear that you have makes a huge difference. But I'm going to forget that I have a bunch of Canon lenses, and I'm going to imagine I'm starting out from scratch. Now, I could go through a list of specifications, but I'm not a detail guy. Not in this regard. I think specifications lead us astray. There's one critical thing that I think is most important when looking at these two cameras. Super 35 versus full frame. For those of us buying Canon R5s, R6s, 90Ds, the Rebel series, Sony a6100, these stills hybrid cameras, we tend to think that full frame is better. And in a lot of situations, it is. But in the cinema world, it's all about Super 35. You can go with full frame and there are lenses for it, but everything is about that Super 35 sensor, the look and feel, the focal length, how everything lines up. So here's what I would ask you right back. What kind of work are you doing? Now, FOMO, I know that you have a channel. And for that situation, well, then either camera is perfectly good. I think both of these cameras are very well. The FX6, I believe, has slightly better dynamic range. But again, you're doing it in a studio and, you know, you've got your lighting and everything. There's really nothing in terms of rocket science. We kind of tune everything up so we don't have to fiddle around with the camera. So I think either camera would work in that regard. But if you're doing films, if you're doing commercial work, I would definitely look at a Super 35 versus full frame. But that's my opinion. FOMO, I'd really love to get your take on this. Why are you considering the FX9, and why are you considering, well, I think I already know why, because I remember you got the R5 and it was an overheating nightmare, and I can't remember if you got rid of it or not. What camera do you have right now? Are you still looking for a new camera, and is this because you're actually considering buying a new camera? And you might also want to reach out to me on the consulting, because I think I might be able to help you. I know you've been struggling for a couple of months and trying to figure out what your next camera is and overheating and other different things. But the real way to look at this is capability based. And I think the first question you need to ask yourself is, despite my voice going a little bit here, Super 35 versus full frame, because there is very much a big difference. There's a lot of articles, a lot of talk about the difference. It's not just about full frame giving you better low light. It's about all the lenses that are available for Super 35 and how it gives you a different look and all that. So yeah, I look forward to hearing back from you. Joe Doc asks, which SD card is good enough for the Canon R6 4K 60 in C-Log? I can tell you right off the top that you can get by in 4K 60 if you have a V60 card. And here, let's take a quick look at the different cards that you can get. If you're shooting 4K video, the industry more or less says that you're probably looking at a V60 card. I wouldn't try a V30 card, but a V60 card is what you're going to need. And if we look at the back of the manual on the R6, this is what it tells us here. If you're doing 4K 60 or 50 frames per second in IPB and it's H.265 with Canon log on, then you're going to need a UHS-2 card. Now, just to show you the next slide here, if you've got an R5, at the back of the manual, it too will tell you what type of card you need. But the focus, what I really want to talk about here is your question. You know, you're saying what is the minimum, which you're focused on write speed. And Joe Doc, I don't know if this is for professional use or hobbyist use. If it's for hobbyist use, then yes, a V60 is fine. It'll save you some money than getting a V90. But if you're doing this for business reasons, you want to go with the fastest. And if you're going to be shooting videos of 30 minutes or more, I would get the minimum card and then go ahead and get yourself something like a Ninja 5. Because what a Ninja 5 is going to do, it's going to record it straight to an SSD. You're going to have much faster speeds. You can record it in Apple ProRes 422, so you don't have any delays, not only transcoding, but moving the content off of the storage, because you can edit right off the SSD. Now, I shot a video a couple of weeks ago. It was an hour long. Actually, it was 90 minutes long. I edited right on the SSD, and compared to previous videos, I saved myself 3 hours. So you also want to think about your write speed and how you're accessing it. And that's the real key. It's not just about writing to the card, it's about your time in getting it off. If you're doing this for business purposes, you want to go with the fastest. And if you buy enough of these SD cards, like you buy a couple of these and they're $256, well, you might as well just buy a Ninja 5 starting at $599. And that's probably what I would do. And I'm on the fence. I'm looking at getting one, but there's so many lenses I need to get right now that give me additional capabilities. And I'm still pretty much a hobbyist that I do this in my spare time. So eventually I'm going to get the Ninja 5, but just not right now. Paul Edwards asks, my church is looking at live streaming our services. We don't have room to move cameras around in the hall, so we're thinking of a cropped Canon DSLR, one that focuses in video mode, on a motorized pan and tilt fixed to the wall. Using the Canon E1 power zoom adapter and the EFS 18-135 so we can control the direction and zoom lens remotely. Do you think that idea would work? We only need HD at this stage. What camera and live streaming equipment would you recommend? Budget is around £1,500. We don't have a full stage lighting if that makes a difference, and camera will be about 40 to 50 feet away from the stage. We will give a sound feed from the house PA with a separate mix for streaming. Paul, I'm really having trouble answering this. I really need to see the scene. If you can somehow get me a photo or an image so I can see what the church looks like. One of the things I'm immediately concerned about, because you're using a crop sensor with a 1.6 crop, and you've got the 18-35 USM or STM, they both have a 3.5 to 5.6. Put that crop in, that's more like a 5.6 to 7, 7.1 or something like that. And since you're going to be zoomed in quite a bit, I think, again, I don't know if you're trying to zoom in on the entire altar, if you're trying to zoom in on your, I would say talent, but it seems inappropriate to refer to a priest or a pastor as talent. But I need to have a better understanding of how you're going to frame this, what it's going to look like, because it's really hard to advise. I mean, this could work very well, but I'm sensing you're going to have a lot of noise and you could have some low light issues. As far as recording audio, I would simply get, like what I'm using here, a Tascam, put it on your subject and record them that way, and then you can synchronize audio and post. But yeah, I do need a bit more information from you. This is what I said at the beginning about consultations. It's questions like this where there's just not enough information here for me to really give you the right answer. King Sam asks, are you going to get the M1 Mac? Well, no, not right now. Now, King Sam, I don't know if you know this, but I actually have the iMac Pro, and it's a beast, so I'm pretty happy with it. And from what I can read already, these M1s can take R5 video and not stutter in the least, and I think it's definitely the way to go. I actually sat down and watched a ton of videos yesterday, and nobody said a bad thing about it, and pretty much everybody was absolutely stunned at the performance. Now, the current offerings out there, I wouldn't buy. I'm using a 27-inch monitor, and it's a good size. The MacBook Pro 16-inch, that one there is pretty much the very bare minimum in terms of screen size that I would need. So sadly, while the MacBook Pro 13 could probably do the job, the screen size is so small that it doesn't help me. As a creative, I need to see a larger size window of the feed that I've got. So sadly, none of what's being currently offered is good enough for me, especially editing in 4K. And so what I'm waiting to see what they'll do is the MacBook Pro 16-inch. The iMacs, I love it. It's over there. It does a great job. But, you know, I'm kind of stuck in the basement. And if it's got the power, I want to be outside and edit. I want to be upstairs with the family. I don't want to be stuck in the basement, especially when it's really cold in the winter. And my hands start to turn purple and I start to shiver. It gets so cold down here. So I'm going to wait a little bit. And what I would recommend, look, if you really need something right now, then yes, go with one of these. But if you can wait till about June, little birdie tells me that we're going to be having some more professional grade Macs with either the M1 or an updated version of the M1 or maybe two of them. I heard one reviewer say, well, they couldn't put these in the Pros because they only have 16 gigabytes of RAM. All right, well, what's to stop them from putting two of these processors in there or putting 32 gigabytes in that? Right? Who knows? We'll just have to wait and see. But patience is a virtue. I was talking to another friend of mine. He was like, oh, I'm thinking again. I said, well, hold off a minute here. You're a pro guy. You need pro gear. Why don't you wait a good 6 months and see what materializes? The old man of tech not only has a great name, he's got a good question. Has Canon actually come out and said that they will remove the 30-minute record limit? Do you see any more upgrades for the Canon 90D? Don't take my word for it. I'm going to queue up a clip. Now, this is from Pro AV, and a big thanks to Pro AV for letting me or giving me permission to insert this clip into my video. They were doing an interview back on July the 10th with Media. Is that how I say her name? Media, I believe it is. And it had come up about the record limit. So let me play that clip for you right now.
Once this basically limit at some point, because they said we've been told that it will be lifted at some point, once that's lifted, it shouldn't be an issue to record 4K 30. As long as you have a card, I guess, large enough, and the camera is powered from the mains, it shouldn't be an issue.
So there you go. Now, there is an awful lot of wiggle rooms there, I've been told, which obviously means she's heard it from internal sources. She's not getting this from Canon rumors. Shows she's been told. Great. So we'll be getting it by Christmas, right? Well, no, not necessarily. We could, but it could also mean we get it in 10 years from now or 50 years from now. There's nothing in there that is precise, but this is what launched the idea that Canon's getting rid of the record limits. It's this video clip here. This is the source of it all. And do I see any more upgrades for the 90D? In terms of firmware, yeah, we'll get some with some minor updates, but nothing major. In terms of 100D or the next model up, I'm not willing to predict that at this point. It depends on how much demand there is for the 90D, because if there's a lot of demand for the 90D, they might. Because right now, in the RF system or the R system, the RF platform, there isn't a full frame equivalent of the capabilities that the 90D has video-wise. Everything's a bit of a compromise. So until Canon comes out with those rumored 2 entry-level RF cameras, I can't, there's a spot missing. They could come out with a 100D. But here's my thought. If you're at the 90D now, by the time you've spent about 3 years with that camera, my thoughts are you're ready to grow. You're ready to grow into full frame. Andre asks, is there some news about the RP Mark II? Is it confirmed that it'll be $1,000 since you had speculated in your video? Now, what I was trying to do in that video is getting the attention of everybody who was looking for the EOS R Mark II and the EOS RP Mark II. And one thing I did say in that video, and I stand behind that, Canon is not going to have a successor to either of these two cameras. They were one-off, and they were put out there by Canon to stop the bleed, to show the market that Canon was serious about mirrorless. That doesn't mean that if you own the RP or even the R, that there isn't a successor for you. There isn't a camera that you can grow into. In that rumor or that video, this one here that you're referencing, I talked about 2 entry-level cameras designed to replace the RP. One that's going to be less than the price of the RP, so I would assume $899 or lower. Probably won't have an EVF, and the reason I suggested that is because, well, the RP is $999, and last Christmas we saw it go for $899, so that gives us a low-end price. And then there's going to be another one between the RP and the R6. So price-wise, it's hard to say because the R6 is $2499, and I don't know. I don't know what Canon's going to do. It most likely is going to be closer to $2,000. So wait till these two cameras come out, but I think you're going to be happy. You're going to have a camera that's more capable than the EOS RP and the R. Di asks, when you record video with the R5, will it fight against panning motion? Does the camera recognize that you're doing those motions on purpose and not fight or stabilize and try to reframe? No, it actually works really well, and I've shot so much video with the R5 since I've got it. And this particular scene here, I was in the forest and I was shooting a pan quite slowly, and what's really impressive here, when I shot this on my 70D, it was almost like it was ghosting. The processor wasn't fast enough, so you'd get a bit of a jitter, a bit of a shake, but you can see this is pretty smooth. And when I started to pan, the Canon camera kept up. It didn't have a problem. And I've also been shooting with gimbals and not have a problem. Now, where I do notice that effect you're talking about is when I'm setting up to film this particular segment here, and I have the R5 on the back, every time I have to adjust it a little bit, and I'm micromillimeters, I'm adjusting it, and it will kind of fight a little bit, but not enough that I can't get it lined up perfectly. On the Road asks, can you post or mention what can be realistically done with a firmware update? I mean, will a firmware update be able to remove the recording time limits? What about the recovery time? Or features like 120 frames per second in 1080, C-Log, and all that other stuff? Well, let's sort of back things up a little bit. What is firmware? And when it comes to a camera, a firmware is basically all the software used to control that camera. So you can change whatever you want. Its only limit is based on the hardware that it comes with. So as far as removing a time limit, yeah, that's simple and easy to do. Record limits due to overheat, well, that's an entirely different thing altogether. It really depends about the architecture of the camera, so there's only so much they can do. Now, as Canon did with the R5 and the R6, with the first major update, they improved the algorithms. And now the cooldown times are so much better. You can record for so much longer. A lot has improved, and that was just more fine-tuning. That was about efficiency. Now, in terms of features like 120 frames per second in 1080, well, let's take a look at the R5 where this is promised. The R5 can do 8K. So it's not a problem with the processor. It's not a problem with the sensor. What Canon could choose to do, they could just take that 4K 120 and downsample it and give you really sharp 1080 at 120 frames per second. Or they could just change it so you can give you 120 frames per second in 1080. It's easy to do that kind of stuff. The thing is, it takes time. Is there enough demand? How does it impact sales? So making these changes, will it make the camera more desirable? Things like that. So does the hardware support it? Is there enough demand for it? And are they willing to prioritize it high enough? A lot of the things that we've seen rumored for the firmware updates, well, they're pretty easy to do in terms of coding. It's the willingness that matters most. Oh, and one other thing. Remember I said which card was I recording to in a previous question? Yeah, I was recording to a UHS 2 card, so I'm really bummed about that. 30 minutes will take a long time to move off, but now I'm on my CF Express card. And you know what? I do check this ahead of time, but sometimes I'll take the card out, put it back in, and Canon decides, yeah, I'm going to record to the SD card, even though I've told it CF Express card. It's been like that since the 5D Mark IV. Bogdan asks a very, very good question. I know what 10-bit color is, but what is 422? And how can I shoot this setting on my R6? I can't find any settings in the camera. Do I need an external recorder? I think a picture's worth 1,000 words. Now, first of all, 422 represents color data, and the technical term for that is chroma subsampling. How's that, right? So you're basically referencing your color data. Now, in 444, what essentially that means is it's not doing any compression whatsoever. Each pixel's color information is safe. And what the 444 means is you're measuring 4 pixels wide. Each pixel has its own color information on the first row. And the last 4 means that on the second row, again, color information is represented for each pixel. Now, what 422 means here in this second image is that there's half the color data. So again, we're still measuring 4 pixels wide. So we take a 4 pixel wide, but in the first row, we're only capturing 2 colors. In the second row, we're only capturing 2 colors. And then 420, 4 pixels wide again, we're only measuring we're only capturing 2 colors for the first 4 pixels in the first row, and the second row just gets whatever the first row does. And you kind of might be shocked when you look at this image here, you're thinking like, oh my God, this must look terrible. And you might be going back to your cameras and say, well, my video looks pretty good. How can this be? And this is where this second image comes in. It might look a little bit complex here, but forget a lot of what I've written on the screen here. What we just talked about, that color data, let's take a look at that middle column. That's your color information. So we got 444, 422, and 420. And what studies have shown us is that, believe it or not, our eyes are less sensitive to color information than they are to the brightness. So what camera companies do is they take the luma, which is your brightness, and the the chroma, which is the color, and they overlap them over top of each other, and that's what the third column represents. So if we take a look at the 422 again, once we apply that luma information, it doesn't look blocky anymore. And that's the key here. The key message is, to first of all answer your question, that 422 is the degree of compression, because the reason we do this is to make the file sizes so much smaller without sacrificing a lot of detail. And that's why H.265 is able to offer much better file sizes than H.264. They've refined things such as chroma subsampling and other algorithms to give us smaller files. So again, 422 means you've got half the color information than an chroma sampled image. But because you've got that luma overlaid over top of it, your eyes really can't tell that much of a difference. So why the hoopla over 8-bit, 10-bit? Well, as an output file, pretty well all of us are watching 8-bit. Our televisions, our monitors are pretty much set to 8-bit. But, and this is why I keep talking about editing and post, the reason why we want that extra color information, well, colorists need it. If you're using green screens, that's very important. This extra information is really, really important to the creatives, to designing the content. So if you're not designing content, this doesn't really matter too much to you. And even still, you can get 8-bit cameras that can produce really good video. So that, Bogdan, is the answer to your question. I hope I didn't get too technical. Notice how I avoided all the math and the formulas. That would have taken a whole hour onto itself. And our last question is from John. John asks, I edit with Divinci Resolve 16. Blackmagic Design recently announced DVR, or Divinci Resolve 17, but they downplayed the fact that it's a beta release. A vlogger reported that DVR 17 has major bugs, specifically that the function for recording voiceover via app just doesn't work. It's fine in DVR 16. Also, DVR 17 projects aren't backwards compatible with DVR 16. Any word from Blackmagic as to when they'll iron out these bugs, and more importantly, why push beta release so hard? Yeah, this really frustrates me. What really frustrates me is the poor people who've gone ahead and upgraded this without knowing this. Now, John, my view on any of this stuff when it comes to hardware such as Apple's new M1, new software updates, operating system updates, is don't do it. As video people, we should be slow to upgrade. I just recently upgraded my operating system to the latest version, just as Apple's ready to release a new one. My operating system updates, I usually wait a year before I upgrade, and any major release to the video editing software, it's about the same. What I'd recommend is stay with DVR 16 since it's still in beta. I'd expect that a lot of these issues would get ironed out. And if DVR 17 isn't backwards compatible, there better be some good explanation as to why. That would be, for me, if a major software package said, by the way, your previous stuff isn't going to be backwards compatible, at that point I'd seriously consider, well, okay, what does the rest of the market look like? I'd look at Final Cut, I'd look at Adobe Premiere, and I'd look at Resolve again, because what they're saying is, yeah, you're kind of SOL. Now you can continue to use the software using an older version, but it's a little frustrating. Now with Final Cut, what I end up doing all the time is when I go and open previous projects, because I still open projects back from 2013, and it usually takes a minute or so for Final Cut to upgrade it to the latest version. But usually everything's fine. So I feel your pain, John. My only advice is don't rush to upgrade. Stay with DVR 16. Wait till see what happens. I don't know why they're pushing it. Everyone does it. Apple does it. Canon does it. Look, the R5 shouldn't have been released when it was. They should have held off a few more months because the overheating was pretty bad. And the software update in firmware 1.1 did a pretty good job of alleviating the concerns. It still overheats, but now it's far more usable. But thank you, John, and thank you everybody for submitting your questions and making this video possible. I do want to talk about one product before I go ahead and sign off. You'll notice I've got some lights behind me. Not so much on this side, but on this side, it's pretty. I got some blues and purples, and I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Simon, well, I know what you might be thinking. Simon, it's a little too bright, or it's a little too purple or blue. I don't really know. It might be a little too distracting, so let me know in the comment section down below, but I definitely like how it pops. But these little guys, Ulanzi, they sent me these, and I just got them today, and yeah, without even fully testing them, I'm using them in a production setting. But that's the ordinary filmmaker. I'm not afraid of one accidentally. Yeah, they're still going. I fully charged them up, but they're still going. I'm not afraid of trying things out live. So let me tell you about them a little quickly, because these guys are stunning. The one down below, I've got it at about 60%, 40%, 30%, and the one right behind me, this one here, which is shining on the entire bookcase, it's pumping out at 100% brightness. Now, in terms of color range, it goes all the way through the spectrum. So you've got all the colors you could need. I think you've got about like 256 settings or something like that. And color temperature, it's around 2500 to, I think, 87, 90 degrees. So they're pretty good. And guess how much they cost? I was actually looking at buying some of these LED lights from my studio some time back, but at $100, $120 a piece, I held off. These were sent to me for review. I don't have to return them, and they didn't tell me what I have to say, which I love it when sometimes companies try to say, oh, well, I need you to say this, and I'll say, look, you know what? And I did this recently with one, and it was a really nice product. I said, look, you know, I did reach a contract, and I can't agree to recommend it. I can agree to do it a really good review, but I can't do that. And I thought that was it, but they altered the contract, sent it back to me, and I understand why they want us to sign contracts, because, you know, quite often they're sending us expensive stuff, and they want to make sure we do a video at least. But the one thing I always want to maintain is I'm not going to say anything if I don't like it. Or I'm not going to say anything good. And what I tend to do is sometimes I get products and I really don't like them at all. I just won't do a review, and I'll let the company know. I said, look, instead of just putting out a nasty review here, I'm just going to give you the opportunity to take these back. I just don't want to cover it. And if I don't think it's of use to you guys, I won't cover them in the channel at all. But these things here, guess how much they cost? $20. $20 each. And the only real limitation that they have, and again, it's $20, there's no mobile app, so I can't use my, my smartphone here to, let's say, oh, I've got 4 of them, sync them up, and I want you all to be blue, or all you to be green, or do other special effects like that. But if you're starting out, if you're a new channel where every dollar counts, like Matt or Scott, these are pretty cool at $20 a piece. For kids too, if they want to do something in their room, and they're easy to charge. On the back of them, they have a USB-C port, which is great because it doesn't matter which way you put it in there, it's going to go in properly. So yeah, full review is going to be coming out next week, but I don't think it's going to change much from what I just told you here. I'm going to go into more details about some of the functions and capabilities, but $20 a piece, well, $19.99 or $19.95, it's pretty awesome. But that's it for now. Don't forget to subscribe for your chance to win the Syncolav S6E or the M3 shotgun microphones. I'll be awarding these 2 prizes once the channel reaches 20,000 subscribers. And then for every 10,000 or so subscribers from there on out, I'll be offering up a newer and better prize. Try that again. I'll be offering up a new and more expensive prize all the way up to about 100,000. And once the channel reaches that level, that big milestone of 100,000 subscribers, well, I'm going to be celebrating by giving away a brand new Canon EOS R5 full-frame mirrorless camera. And on that bombshell, thanks so much for watching The Ordinary Filmmaker. We'll see you again soon.